Hi again, we're now at the 5th lesson, the material factor. In the previous lesson we've been discussing every piece's properties. In this lesson we'll talk about coordination between different pieces and about different material correlations. I'd like to remind you that we're still learning the second step of endgame planning, how to use your pieces to realize a certain plan. Here we go. Here is the first principle. In an endgame, a harmony of your pieces becomes very important. Since you have only a few pieces, it's very important to use them maximally effectively. You should keep a good coordination of your pieces and focus them on a certain target. This is the only way to create an effective attack with a scanty quantity of the pieces. Now we come to the next question. How to make your pieces harmonic? There are two principles here. First, your pieces should supplement each other, not redundant. And the second idea, you should keep your pieces closely to each other. Let's analyze the first idea. Your pieces should supplement each other. What does it mean? Let's start right from the beginning. When you need to evaluate the power of a piece, you calculate the quantity of squares under its control. And this is how we know that a rook is stronger than a bishop, for instance. Therefore, when you need to evaluate the power of two pieces, you should calculate the quantity of squares under their control. In this position, the white's pieces are controlling 40 squares. If we replace the queen to e5, then they will control only 32 squares, because now the bishop is doubling the queen. Therefore, the previous position was better for white. Of course, you will not calculate squares in a real game. However, it's intuitively obvious when your pieces supplement each other. Later I'll give you some more practical examples. Now let's analyze the second idea. You should keep your pieces closely to each other. Well, of course this is a little simplification of the things. However, it's a practical rule and it often works. When you have only a few pieces, they should attack in one direction. In this case, they will be able to do something real. This usually happens when they stand closely to each other. Black certainly has an advantage because of the d5 passed pawn. However, it seems difficult to realize it. White has a powerful bishop, controls the d-file, and can bring the king into the center. Black needs to focus all the pieces in the center to support his passed pawn's advance. Let's see how Black did it in the game. King f7. First, Black is transferring the least active piece in the center. h3, covering the g4 square. King e7, king f2, king d6, king f3. Now Black has all the pieces in the center, and he starts pushing the pawn. d4, bishop b1, rook e3 check, king f4, white is trying to go forward, knight d5 check, king g4, and king e5. Black got an ideal and harmonious position. His pieces are united around the passed pawn, they supplement and support each other. Now white can take the h7 pawn because of knight f6 fork. By the way, Black is suddenly threatening mate. If white plays something like bishop a2 or something else, then after knight f6 check, king h4 and h6, Black is suddenly winning because of the g5 threat. White can't stop it. And this is the power of the good coordinated pieces in an endgame. In the game, White played h4. It's the only move to prevent a checkmate. And here Black has a powerful move h5 check. White can't take the pawn, because after rook g3, he will be mated by a knight f6 or knight f4. After the only move king h3, black has another powerful continuation, d3. White can't take the pawn again. This time black will answer knight f4 fork. Everything goes really well for black. This is the power of good coordinated pieces. Okay, let's go to the game. After king h2, black will answer king d4, and he is keeping an ideal harmonic position. Next, black will play knight f6 to the e4, and this coordinated force looks really threatening. The white's separate pieces can't do anything, while black can make whatever he wants. Now you can assess a value of a harmony in an endgame. Let's discuss the next endgame principle. In an endgame, a value of bishops and pawns goes up. This idea is much more profound than it looks. It will help you to understand easily most of the positions with unequal material. Here I'd like to clarify that a material ratio is different in a middle game and in an endgame. We've been talking a lot about the importance of a pawn structure in an endgame. I won't dwell at length on this question. In an endgame, pawns have good chances to be promoted into a queen. That's why their value raises in an endgame. Let's talk about bishops in greater details. In the middle game, a bishop can't show its full power because the position is often closed with pawns and other pieces. In an endgame, a centralized bishop controls the whole board and becomes very powerful. In this quite standard position, white has a bishop against a knight. It determines white's advantage. King c3, knight c7, king c4, taking the pawn, b6, a4. White is threatening a5 and is provoking black to move a pawn. I hope that you remember this idea from the lesson about the first endgame plan. a5. Now black has a lot of weaknesses on the queen side, which has been fixed already. f4. White starts realizing the second endgame plan. He uses his pawn majority on the king side and is moving the pawn without a counterpart. King g7, g4, king f6, h4. White is also ready to play g5 to fix the black's weaknesses on the king side. So black played h6, bishop e4. Black is totally paralyzed and can't do anything. The white's bishop controls both sides of the board, while the black's knight controls only a queen side. It means that the white's bishop is 2 times stronger. King g7, white played king d3, king f7, king e3. A king should be centralized in an endgame. King f6, g5. This fixes the black's weak pawn on g6. King g7, bishop d3. It's a preparation to move the king forward. Knight d5 check, king e4, knight b4, bishop b1. Black tried to activate his knight, but it still does nothing. Here white uses a very powerful idea. When you keep 2 squares between your bishop and an opponent's knight, it cuts off the knight. Okay, in the game that followed, h takes, king f8, king e5, taking the g6 pawn, king f7, and bishop e4. This position shows clearly a power of a bishop in an endgame. It controls the whole board really. The black's knight controls only a local area on the queen side. By the way, white is using the same idea again. There are 2 squares between the bishop and the knight is just stuck on the queen side, and it has no moves really. After king g7 and king d6, white got a winning position. He will play king c7, and black has nothing to oppose. Here we may arrive at an important conclusion. A bishop is generally stronger than a knight. In an endgame, a bishop is much stronger. This advantage is often enough for a win. Okay, let's look again at two main ideas about material in an endgame. First, the harmony of your pieces becomes very important, and the second, a value of bishops and pawns goes up. These are very profound ideas. We may make a lot of useful conclusions based on them. First, I should say that you do not need to memorize all these consequences. You need to understand them. When you know the base principles, you will easily understand their logical consequences. Okay, here is the first idea. 3 pawns are approximately equal to a minor piece in general. In a middle game, a minor piece often stronger than 3 pawns. In an endgame, 3 pawns often stronger. It's because the pawn's value goes up in an endgame. Okay, next. A rook and 2 pawns are approximately equal to the 2 minor pieces. In a middle game, 2 minor pieces are often stronger. In an endgame, a rook with pawns often stronger. The next same principle. A minor piece with 2 pawns is about equal to a rook. In an endgame, a minor piece with pawns is often stronger. The reason is still the same. The pawn's value goes up. The next idea. In an endgame, a bishop's value goes up. It becomes closer to a rook's value than to a knight's one. A bishop with 2 pawns fights better against a rook than a knight with 2 pawns. It's a logical consequence of the previous principle. Next, a bishop is often stronger than 3 pawns. A knight rarely can be stronger. First, the bishop is stronger than a knight in general, and secondly, a bishop works well with pawns. We've discussed it in the previous lesson. Okay, the next idea. A rook with a bishop is stronger than a rook with a knight. And a queen with a knight may be stronger than a queen with a bishop. Let's analyze the last 2 items in more details, because they are very practical. Here white has 2 bishops with the rooks, while black has the knights. Let's see how the game will continue. White played king e2, bringing the rook into the center, rook e8, g4. The active and attacking side should push pawns in an endgame. Rook e6, h4, rook e7. It's quite difficult to find any active plan for black, really. Bishop f3, knight c5, rook d5. White is preparing g5 move. Knight a6. Black tries a separate tactical idea, but of course it can't change the situation. a3, preventing knight b4, knight c5, b4, pawn takes, knight a6, b5. These are all the forcing moves, knight c5, and rook a1. After all, white got the new open file. The white's rooks and bishops are controlling most of the territory. Knight f6, rook d2 d1. Of course, white should not take on the f6. Knight e4, black is still waiting, rook a7, king f8, and here white started a direct attack by playing g5. As we know, rooks and bishops need to have open lines, so such a sacrifice is very natural for white. h takes, bishop c6, rook h1. White was able to develop a strong attack even in an endgame. Now he is threatening rook h8 mate. King g8, rook a1, the rook is going to the king side, knight e6, rook h4, f6, rook g1. All the white pieces take part into the attack and supplement each other. King f7, bishop d5. Okay, let's stop here. The white's position is totally winning. White is threatening f4, f5 for instance, and many other things. Black can't stop it. Why the white's attack was so easy and effective? You can see that the rooks and bishops are in a good harmony. They both need open lines to be active. They both are long-range pieces and can easily cooperate to attack something. For example, the b2 bishop and the g1 rook are attacking the black's king side. At the same time, rooks and bishops are not doubling each other. Rooks control lines while bishop diagonals. It's much more difficult to consolidate a rook with a knight, because they work in different trajectories. We may arrive at some conclusions. A bishop is stronger than a knight in an endgame. A rook with a bishop has better harmony than a rook with a knight. Therefore, a rook and a bishop is often much stronger than a rook and a knight. Who is better now? It seems like an unclear position. Black has some weaknesses, but he also has a passed pawn on the d4 and a bishop against a knight. Let's see what happened then. Bishop e6, taking the a2 pawn. What should white do now? An attacker side should avoid pawn exchange in an endgame. That's why white doesn't want to trade the pawns a2 and a6. So white played a3 instead of knight takes a6, bishop c4, e5, the d4 pawn is under an attack, queen d8, and knight e4. Okay, let's look at this position more thoroughly. White has a lot of threats. Knight d6 following by queen takes d4, knight f6 check, queen h6 following by knight f6 or knight g5. You see that a queen and a knight both create a lot of tactical motifs, and they supplement each other well. A queen and a knight can both make a lot of sudden attacking moves, and it makes this bunch very dangerous for an opponent. We may conclude that a queen with a knight has a good harmony. For example, in the current position, black can't stop all the white's threats. He played king h7 to prevent queen h6 move, but white goes from another side. Knight d6, attacking the bishop, bishop d5, knight takes f7. Black cannot take the knight because after that the e-pawn will go forward very quickly. That's why he played queen f8, knight g5 check, king g7, queen takes d4. White won the second pawn and the attack on the black's king is going strong. After the next few moves, black resigned. Okay, let's make some conclusions. A bishop is stronger than a knight generally. At the same time, a queen with a knight has a good harmony. That's why the situation is ambiguous. That's why queen with a knight are often equal to the queen with a bishop, and sometimes can be even stronger. Okay, the next aspect I'd like to discuss in this lesson is an exchange in an endgame. There are only a few guideline ideas here. The first idea: the defensive side should exchange pawns. It also implies that the attacking side should avoid pawn exchanges. The two main attacking endgame plans are closely connected to a pawn structure. When a defender trades his pawns, an opponent will not be able to attack them anymore. When a defender exchanges opponent's pawns, an attacker will not be able to push them forward anymore. Also, most of positions without pawns are a theoretical draw, so you may sacrifice your minor piece for the last opponent's pawn and reach a draw easily. A pawn exchange is one of the main defensive ideas in an endgame. It's important to remember it. Black has an advantage. He may try to push the passed pawn forward. He can transfer the knight to c5 and attack the white's pawns then, and so on. A defensive side should exchange pawns, and white played c5, d takes and d6. White is deflecting the king takes, and king takes e4. Now white is threatening to play bishop f5 and to take the f4 pawn after that. Then white will sacrifice a bishop for the black's last pawn and will reach a draw. After c4, bishop f5, c3 and king d3, white realized his plan successfully. Now white will take the c3 pawn, and after that white will sacrifice the bishop for the last black's pawn on the f-file. White is a pawn up, while black has some weaknesses that look significant. White is going to play king e2, then rook h d1, and he will get an easily winning position. What should black do to try to save the game? He should trade pawns. He played a5 with an idea a4. King e2, rook d5, rook h d1, rook takes, and a4. Black realized his idea in time. White shouldn't take the pawn now, because after rook b2 check, black will take the a2 pawn and probably the a4 pawn after that. Okay, let's go back. That's why white played rook d3, pawn takes, and rook e8. Black wants to play rook a2 to attack the white's kingside pawns. f4, rook a2, king f3, bishop d6, knight c3, and rook b2. Black is always hunting for the white's pawns. Knight b5, h5. Black is consistent in realizing his plan. Now he is going to play h4, h3, and then take the h2 pawn with the rook. Knight takes d6, c takes, h3. White tries to stop the h5 pawn, but after h4 it becomes very difficult for white to do something. He played king g4. Of course it's good for black because this is another pawn exchange. Rook takes g2, king takes h4. Here black played rook b2. Black has traded a lot of pawns and now it's very difficult for white to get any tangible advantage. The game ended in draw afterwards. An idea of the pawn exchange was the guideline of the black's defense. Okay, let's go to the next rules about an exchange in an endgame. A side with a material advantage should exchange pieces. A defensive side should try to leave unequal pieces. Well, these rules are not about a chess strategy really, but they are practical rules. When you have a material advantage, you want to simplify a realization of this advantage and to prevent an opponent's counterplay. Thus, you want to win a game easily and without any risk. That's why you need to exchange pieces. A defensive side should complicate a position to trip the opponent. That's why a defender should imbalance pieces activity. You may exchange your bishop on an opponent's knight or your rook with pawns for an opponent's minor pieces or something like that. So you need to create an unbalanced position. Okay, these are all the main ideas about a material in an endgame. Now let's make some conclusions. First, in an endgame, a harmony of your pieces becomes very important. your pieces should supplement each other, not double, and you should keep your pieces closely to each other. The next conclusion. In an endgame, a value of bishops and pawns goes up. This helps you to understand easily most of the positions with unequal material. And the next important thing, what to exchange in an endgame. First, a side with a material advantage should exchange pieces. Next, a defensive side should exchange pawns, and a taker side should avoid pawn exchanges. And the third, a defensive side should try to leave unequal pieces. Okay, that's all that I wanted to say for you in this lesson. Thanks for your attention. See you in the next lesson.